Welcome to the E-commerce Leader Series podcast, the podcast for leading e-commerce brands that are navigating a rapid evolving AI landscape. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Deb Farnworth-Wood, the owner and CEO of ISSADA, an Australian-based ethical and clean cosmeceutical range of skincare products. I must admit, Deb, I had to look what cosmeceutical meant before starting this podcast. So welcome.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you for inviting me along. Cosmeceutical, to explain that point, means that it contains active ingredients, which may be peptides, vitamins, or synthetic ingredients, which will help promote skin health, skin well-being, and are good for you as opposed to being bad for your skin.
Fantastic. So Deb, to get started, maybe you can give our audience a little bit of a background on yourself, and then maybe switch gears into presenting what ISSADA does and where you're at today and where do you want to bring the brand going forward?
Sure. So my background is quite varied. So I started my life out originally in hospitality and retail, and then sort of fell into healthcare, where I spent 18 years in a combination of healthcare environments, general practice, pharmacy, a little bit of dental, surgical units, and working with the NHS in the UK, because I'm English, if you haven't noticed by the voice. I'm working alongside the NHS on projects like managing waiting lists. So my background was very much about real health and not from a beauty background at all. So I'll go back to it. So in 2006, my husband decided he wanted to move to Australia and retire. He was 39 and I was 44. And between us, we had a collection of businesses. And so we sold our businesses and moved to Australia. And to get into Australia, the easiest way at the time was to buy a business. So we bought a small aesthetic clinic. And my intention was keep the clinic till we'd got our permanent residency and then sell it, but got completely hooked by the industry and ended up growing a brand of 61 Medi Aesthetic Clinics, which is the Australian skin clinic franchise. Wow. So having sold that in 2019, I retired again and got bored again. And from then, my oldest son, had been working with me as Australian skin clinics while he was at university, and he developed a lot of skincare. And so he became a cosmetic chemist, and then we launched together ISSADA Clinical Formula. But to do that, we bought ISSADA, the mineral makeup brand, which was owned by a friend of mine. And I'd been using her products for about 12 years at that point. So I already knew and loved the brand. And we bought that to launch the skincare in. So not a typical beauty story by any means. Beauty's not really my core training, but my super skill is just business generally.
Fantastic. So you've been on this journey for 6 years now. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about the business model in general, like maybe the split between online sales versus other channels that are more brick and mortar by nature?
So we had a huge challenge when I bought the business. So ISSADA had never been online when I bought it, and I bought the business mid-COVID in 2020. It had never been online. COVID was nearly over by the time I bought it. So lots of people were, as we know, the e-commerce boomed then, but we didn't because we weren't online. So we actually managed to get our first website up and running within 2 weeks of buying the business, which was nothing short of miraculous. And we did, in the first 1 month, we did the equivalent of all their telephone sales the year before. So that was a good move. The split of the business is roughly a third e-commerce, a third wholesale, and a third retail through our stores. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting combination. We also manufacture all our skincare in our own factory, which is GMP and ISO accredited. And again, that was new from when I bought the business. And the challenges I faced initially were no systems at all. So there's no inventory, basic accounting. Bookkeeper used to come in for 2 hours a month to do the accounts. The supply chain was not great. And again, COVID exacerbated that problem. We saw lead times go from 16 weeks to at one point 56 weeks. We lost some of our wholesale customers because of it. But all those things we were able to fix as we've gone through. And one job I had way back when I was only in my early 20s, when computers were just a thing. I am that old, right? So there were no computers when I was at school. And when I was about 21, they just started to launch. And I worked at that time for Debenhams department stores in the UK. And I had the first personal computer. It wasn't even a company one. I bought my own and took it to work. But before that, I was involved in EPOS implementation when we went from, the old-fashioned credit card machines. And so I learned early on how to specify what I needed that software to do. So I couldn't code, I couldn't write it, but I was very good at explaining what I needed. And I've learned that's been very useful with AI, of course, because the prompt is everything.
Right, of course. So we're going to get that in a second, but just to lay the scene, so looking retrospectively, so you've been on this journey for 6 years, you've grown obviously tremendously during that time. What's quite interesting is that maybe unlike other guests on this podcast, you have an end-to-end business that goes from, I guess, formulation to manufacturing to selling through your own stores as well, in addition to your website. How do you how do you stay on top of all of this? Because each segment of the value chain is its own challenges, right? And you're just I guess it just compounds the more segments you have in that value chain.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes it feels like every day there's a new wheel coming off because you fix one problem and another arises somewhere else. I guess I treat it a little bit like I did the franchise business, where, that's multi-units in multiple places. You have to have the same rules. So I'm very systemized and organized. Our systems are complex though. And I will say, this is my first e-commerce business, but prior to that, I'd had 10 other businesses, which all were very well systemized because I insisted they were. This has been the biggest challenge by far. And it's a combination of everybody you ask has got a different preference about what is the best software. You get yourself an app that you think is going to cure your problems and it creates 3 more, or you get an app and it doesn't talk to the next app, or it stops your website working, or the staff don't like it, and it's actually been the most challenging business I've ever managed, if I'm honest. Yes. Yeah. And some days it's nearly broken me, but I thrive on a challenge, fortunately.
As an aside, is it also the most rewarding because it's the most challenging?
On good days, yes. On good days, yes. There are moments when I feel like, well, why am I doing this? And it's also the personalities involved. When I had the franchise business, the original clinic I bought offered 47 different services and needed 4 skills of staff. So we condensed the services to 7 that only needed really 2 types of staff. So that reduced the amount of marketing, the amount of training, and made it a much more succinct business. And that was really successful. And now I'm back in the position where I've got so many grades of staff because we've got manufacturing team, we've got pick and pack team, we've got sales team, education. And so it feels like it's quite a complicated business, but through all of that madness, sometimes it feels like there absolutely is an end goal, and we're working towards it.
Right. So that's thank you. That's a nice segue. Actually, sorry, thank you and fascinating. So that's a nice segue to start talking a little bit about technology, just not software in general, but sorry, not software in particular, but AI in general. So in this entire value chain, first of all, how do you think about AI for ISSADA? Like, is it a thing? Is it not a thing? Are you an ostrich like hiding or are you embracing it?
I'm not an ostrich, no. I love anything new. I've got ADHD, so my brain goes straight to whatever's new and entertaining. So they tick, tick, tick. The areas that I have concern are many, but the areas where I can see useful are also many. And we're in early days. So in terms of usage, we're a little bit different to some skincare brands. I won't say all because there's lots of skincare brands like mine, but we are very tightly governed by what we can say in Australia about our products. So we have the TGA, which is like the FDA. And so we have to be very careful with our words. It can get us in a lot of trouble. And that's one concern I have about AI. Sometimes it gets carried away. And so I think it's a really useful tool. For example, copywriting. If you've ever got writer's block, it can start you off. But I do insist that the copywriters actually almost rewrite it from any script that they've developed from ChatGPT and fact check. Because again, copywriters, they're good at putting copy together, but they don't necessarily understand the nuances of legally what we can say all the time. So we have to do a lot of checking behind the scenes. The areas where I've got concern are potentially with things like IP. I banned the marketing team from using anything that's not paid. So they're not allowed to put anything about ISSADA on free AI at all, because of the protection, to keep that in there. And also the concerns I have are still, I suppose it's really an ethical thing for me, but when some brands portray the most immaculate, beautiful, perfect faces that are not real, then I think that's misleading to the customer. And as yet, I don't think there's any laws about doing that, but I'm sure that's something that will follow. So I refuse to allow the team to use AI-generated faces. And we are really about real people and how real people look. You know, I'm 62 and this is how I look, and I'm proud of it. And I want them to use people who are happy with the way they feel, and not AI. So that's one area that we do have a bit of a no-no on. But there's other areas of sort of, I suppose, generative design where, you know, I'm not so worried. So if they use AI to produce a picture of a bottle on a shelf, I don't really care, as long as they make sure the bottle is on the shelf, not floating above it or hanging off the edge of it, which we do often see.
That's interesting. We speak to a lot of ethical brand owners, or brand owners who are also ethical, and it's kind of a common thread. Everyone is saying this, right? Like, let's use the tools to be able to increase the productivity of anything that is product related. But as the moment you start showing human faces, like, we want real people. Like, we don't want AI generated content. And I think it's probably a reflection of the broader society, which is that in this age of AI slop, I think people are really looking for authenticity, and something that looks too perfect, feels like it's AI generated. It's uncanny. I mean, today it's almost impossible to tell the difference. But I think the brands that are going to keep that authenticity in their messaging are the ones that are going to win in the end.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for example, on the makeup side of our business, our viewer wants to see how makeup's put on, how it's applied and made on a real face. And so if you've got AI doing that on an AI face, then it's kind of not the same thing. And also, my demographic is not the young teenager or the kiddie. You know, we're a high value makeup, our skincare and makeup is both cosmeceutical. So that's not cheap. So we're probably premium, I wouldn't say premium, but high range. And so our demographic is really not looking for that gimmicky advice or that gimmicky image of an AI face. They're looking to see someone who looks like them, because they want to know that they can look like that too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when you were scaling the company, could you talk to us a little bit about the operational assumptions that you were making then that eventually end up breaking because the company was just getting bigger?
I suppose, really, I mean, my history is growth. So every business I've ever had has grown, and, you know, grown substantially. We've also done a lot of firsts. So, for example, in the UK, I had the first robotic pharmacy in the UK, and we brought in this was 28 years ago. We brought in a
robotic pharmacy.
Yeah, robotic pharmacy. We had it was called Spencer the dispenser, and he could pick 8 prescription items a minute, which was faster than our pharmacists could. However, we couldn't reload the machine unless we closed or we shut him down to do it. So we ended up sending it back because although it was faster for dispensing, we couldn't fill it back up again, so we'd run out. So we had that for about 3 months on trial, and it was a £350,000 machine 28 years ago, and we had to send it back to Germany. So every business I've ever had has had challenges and growth challenges, and I'm pretty good at navigating what they're going to be. I think in terms of my A to Z plan, AI's coming. Wasn't really there when we started, it was only just coming, but yes, it features more highly. Some of the issues we have are people's distrust and dislike of it.
Yeah.
We've got staff who don't like it, who are opposed to it. We've got staff who are concerned about the cooling factor and the water and the supply.
Right.
And so I think there's a few hurdles to overcome in terms of what happens next in AI and how those fears are resolved.
Yeah.
But the areas that we are using it have made a phenomenal difference. So my personal love is Copilot. I never thought I'd say that. I don't like Microsoft, but I turned Copilot on for my spreadsheets, and oh my God, it's like simplified my work, and I love it. And I showed it to my bookkeeper just last week, and he's loving it too now. So the amount of hours of analysis that can be saved, that is phenomenal. And you know, to reduce, you give it a spreadsheet or 3 spreadsheets and you ask it to compare the data, and it's mind-blowing what it comes up with. The speed of that is phenomenal and the value is incredible. So focusing on the areas where we're going to get the quick wins, and then delaying areas where we've got the concerns about either ethics or containment. So surprisingly, I don't have AI on my inbox. I had a system. We fed it every single one of our training manuals, and then it spat out garbage in the end. And what I found out was I've got to feed it a different way. And that actually meant rewriting all those manuals. So we haven't done that, but I've now worked out that probably ChatGPT could do all that for me now. And so, you know, that's probably the next step. But we had it definitely hallucinating and telling fibs, and we had to shut it down. So
yeah, that happens. That happens, unfortunately. Can I push a little bit on this? I think that the reason I was asking you about hiding where you were on that scale between, you know, hiding from it and embracing it is that what we see is that we see a landscape that's shifting very, very fast. Actually, not only is it shifting very fast, but it's accelerating at the moment. And it's kind of almost a case of, look, the train is leaving the station. You're gonna have to be on it, because if you're not on it, you're gonna get steamrolled by someone else who is on it. And the reality is that, and I think the debate is raging at the moment between the AI doomers and kind of the humanists who have a rosy picture of the future. But the basic premise is that, look, you now have tools that are able to increase your employees' productivity by a factor of X. And X is a big number. Depending on where they sit in the organization, it can be 2, it can be 10. If they don't embrace the tool, by definition, they will become less productive than competitors who are. And it's not a question of cost cutting. It's not a question of headcount reduction. Far from it. I mean, I'm on the side of actually you have that team, and suddenly you have this magic wand where you were able to literally increase the output of the team by a large factor. You really need to take advantage of this, right? So at every functional area of the business, especially for yours, which is quite complex because there's so many different moving parts in it, not maximizing the output of the team is kind of a dead weight. And I think the tools are becoming sufficiently intuitive to use that even someone who's not versed in technology or software or what have you is now able to really take advantage of what's out there. Just like you said, like, I mean, we're using Copilot with Excel. I mean, it's incredible. It actually goes out and builds the entire model like in in a few prompts. I mean, that was not available 2 months ago. Now it is. And you have to take advantage of it, right? So I think it's sorry, I didn't want to cut you off in your flow, but the general idea is that people should move a little bit away from this fear. I mean, it's normal to fear something that's new and innovative and kind of feel threatening, honestly, to quite a few people, because they feel like they're gonna be replaced. But I don't think it's a replacement at all. I think it's just an incredibly powerful tool that you make available to them, and their work becomes more higher level, but like all the drudgery goes away, right? All the, like you said, you can save hours of analysis that are hours that can be spent doing better stuff, like spending time with your clients, spending time with your supply chain, spending time with your employees, your colleagues, right?
Yeah, and even better than that, I mean, the hours of analysis I was doing was nowhere near as good as what it can do in 2 minutes. And so the level of feedback is so valuable to my business. So, it threw out some facts to me the other day. I was asking it to, we're about to move factory later this year or in the next couple of months, and I'm trying to condense my pick and pack into a smaller area than it's in now. And I said, how do I do this? And I put in the whole year's sales data by product, and it told me what to put on the first shelf, what to put at hip height, what to put at head height, what can go in the back room. Incredible. If I sat there and tried to do that, because we've got over 500 SKUs. So if I was to sit there with 500 SKUs and try and work that out, that would be months work, a month, a whole month. And it did it in moments. So the quality is better. I think from the staff perspective, yeah, there is always that fear that it's going to make them lose their job. I'd like to think that the majority of my staff actually will realise and like the fact that it's going to make their job easier, more, again, that information side particularly, they're going to feel like they're in better control because they understand better what's going on. Some basic places where I've tried to get them, and it's been very successful, I'm going back a year probably now, was we had a couple of new team members that were constantly asking questions on how to do things on the system. So, how do I get simple things in inventory? Where do I put this? And so I gave ChatGPT a name. I called him Harry, and I said, we're going to ask Harry. And I just showed them, how do I do this on Sim 7 or whatever it was? And it gives them the answer. Well, that tool saved me 100 questions a day from new starters. That was incredible. And so what we're trying to do now is get all our SOPs in a way that they're organized and structured so they can just go to our SOPs for the same thing. And even our training platform, at the moment, there's no AI in the training platform at all, but the plan is to introduce a chatbot into that so that we've got the same thing going on there. So I don't think anybody in the building, any of my team are opposed completely. They've all got individual concerns. I've got a few millennials and Gen Z, so they're concerned environmentally. But I'm old enough to remember that when computers were first introduced, they were the size of a department store, and there was concerns then about the heat that they were throwing out into the air and for global warming and all of that. And we've overcome all of those things, and now that's in the size of a phone now. So so all of that will improve, and it has to. So that's we'll see that change. But I think in the main they're interested. The other side is time to teach and time for them to learn, and we don't have the in-house skills necessary to teach. I was able to show them ChatGPT, but that's fairly easy. So it's then how we structure that learning and that pulling together of information, and then how we make sure that our systems are secure. So as I said, I don't allow them to put anything on any unpaid platforms. And then the reason for that was one day I asked ChatGPT a question. I always had a paid version. And it said to me, would you like to know what your competitors do about this? And I said, yes, please. Didn't ask who they were. It put up my competitors. It knew who they were. And it told me their pricing policies, how they were looking at their pricing structure. It told me one of them had inflated their prices by 30%, so they could reduce them by 30%. You know, it knows everything.
It does, and I can tell you from first-hand experience, because that's a product that we're offering to our clients. Is a typical use case would be go out and tell me exactly that. So the pricing policy of all my competitors, you don't have to say who the competitors are. The system can find it on its own, just because it does a web scraping, right? But then you go to a higher level, which is if one of my competitors is suddenly doing a heavy promotion, first you need to alert me, and then you need to come up with a tactical response that's optimized for that specific specific promotion for my competitor. And that's when you really see the magic of the AI coming to bear, because you will see that in certain instances, the system will tell you, don't do anything now, you wait 10 days, and in day 11, then you counter. And and then it will give you the exact reasoning how it came out. It came up with this answer. So yes, I mean, look, anything that is searchable on Google is accessible to the LLMs. That's table stakes. So yeah, you have to be a little bit careful about what you put out there. But then again, I don't think it's materially different from the status quo, i.e. the pre-AI, meaning that information was there on the internet anyway. And if someone had spent the time to go out and scrape it, they would have gotten the same information, meaning, all your competitors' pricing pages and SKUs, etc.
Yeah, the areas where I'm more concerned about the unpaid versions is, for example, if you're analysing sales figures, or if you're analysing customer activity, then you're putting customer data up there, which you don't want. Formulas, so we don't use AI to create formulas, but we certainly store formulas, and we don't want to, and we may compare formulas. So we wouldn't want that out there. So those are the areas that I'm particularly concerned.
No, 100%. And by the way, just bouncing off on the customer thing, in Europe, we have GDPR. You just, not only do you not want to do it, but you are not allowed to.
That's right.
So it's against the law. And yeah, like you're right. The free versions, you don't have the option. On the paid version, you have the option of telling the system to not use your data for training. But on the free version, you don't have that. You don't have that option, unfortunately, or fortunately. I mean, whatever. That's a trade-off. That's why it's free.
And in fact, very early on, when he gave me competitive information, I said to ChatGPT, "If you're sharing this with me, how do I know you're not sharing my data with others?" And he said, "Because you use the paid version." Programmed to say that, but hey,
that's false. They are sharing. So I can tell you that they're not using your data to train the model. So there's the training, and then there's what happens after the training. So when ChatGPT releases 5.2 or 5.4, they spend 6 months training that model, and then what they're saying is, for the training bit, they're not using your information. But then after that, if that information is somehow searchable on the web, one way or another, they will find it, and they will share it with other people. So there's a gray area there that no one really knows. But again, I wouldn't, it pays to be prudent and to not give the benefit of the doubt in that instance. Can I ask you? We talked a little bit about some use of AI that you're starting to implement internally. Just at a higher level, and because you're a systems person, it feels to me you like implementing things that once, and then it becomes scalable, and that allows you to just grow your business. Have you thought about AI implementations that are higher levels around data analysis and data science? So for example, the ability for you to, especially because I would imagine you have such a long lead time between the R&D and the commercialization of the product, but anything that has to do with demand forecasting or SKU forecasting, or even, I don't know, if I'm sure you have seasonality in your business as well, let alone whatever happens upstream on the R&D side, just, whatever happens because of seasonality. Would you be thinking about using AI tools to augment what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly in our inventory system, it introduced its own AI forecasting software, but it was rubbish. So we stopped using it. So we tried that for about 6 months, I think, but we couldn't rely on it. So again, we're using Copilot to do that now. So we just extract the data out of one system into Copilot. So that's been very useful. In terms of lead times and project management, I use it to, so as you say, development is quite long. So we never know how long the first stage is going to be. So the first stage is finding the ingredients, making a cream or product, testing it on our friends and family. So once we've got all the way through that part, then it's much easier to predict a timeline. So we would use that to schedule. In terms of seasonality, yes, because it uses the history of previous years' seasonality.
Yeah.
And even to what we sort of analysed the stock we have. We looked at where our sales lie. We were very afraid of dropping any lines because stockists in particular love their lines. But it gave us a few cold, hard facts about lines that were just not worth stocking. So we ended up dropping those. Yeah, we use it in that. We've got, I use it to sort of sensibility check a lot of things. So, for example, simple things like I was putting a package together for a particular use type. It was actually for makeup artists, and I kind of ran it by actually just ChatGPT because I think he's good for fact checking, and he came up with several ideas that I wouldn't have thought of, and changed the pack and gave me the reasons why, and then told me how to market it. And yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. And people say the constant thing that I butt up against is people say, but it hallucinates. And I can tell you, I've been in business for 40 years, right? I can never remember ever employing one staff member, one consultant, or one high-level person who never got something wrong. Yes. And not only never got something wrong, but didn't get things wrong frequently. I'm not perfect. I get things wrong frequently. So it's just the same as a person. I fact check people as much as I would fact check AI.
No, it's exactly that. It's same as employee with the material difference that employee has read everything that could have been read that's been produced by humanity up to this point. So the level of knowledge and the level of synthesis of that knowledge is incredible. But then again, I use this analogy of like, imagine you're bringing AI into your business. Imagine you have this PhD in every single domain that you wish that person had, arriving on day one. And if it were a real person, you can't just say, go and do this without a little bit of introduction as to what the company is, right? Like what we're doing, what our brand, our values are, what's our mission, how are all this intrinsic knowledge that is not necessarily recorded anywhere, written in for the company, but that is latent in your head, in the head of your colleagues, and all of this. I mean, that's super important, right? You expect the person to be able to absorb this before they can start becoming productive. So I think it's kind of like thinking that just because it's incredibly intelligent, it's just going to be able to be incredibly productive from the get-go is a little bit unfair.
It is, and people take a long time. Most people would talk about an induction period being 3 months, but in some roles it could be 9 months, a year before they really get everything that's going on in a business.
Yeah.
So it's still faster.
Yeah. I'm conscious of the time, Deb. My last question, is there anything that we didn't talk about this morning that you'd like to talk about?
I think, I wanted to share actually just one experience I had. I've been trying to get 11 labs to copy my voice.
Yeah.
I came up and decided we've got this whole training package. We've got, when we introduce new stockists, we've got a whole online package of loads of modules, like must be a few hundred of them. And we've got video, we've got the written, and I thought it would be really great to just have the voice. And I spent 2 days trying to train 11 Labs on my voice, and every single time, when it does the check at the end, it said it wasn't my voice. And I was recording it on the same machine where we are now, on a better mic than we're on now, and it didn't like it at all. And I realized it's because when I'm practicing, I'm probably speaking slower, and then when I talk again, when I'm not reading the script, I'm probably a bit faster, and it was a nightmare, and I gave up. I've got to do it again sometime.
Yeah, that's strange, because I mean we don't really use them because we don't have a use case, but I hear about them a lot, and I only hear good things.
Yeah, so I found a few other people who said the same, but yeah, that was really interesting.
Interesting. Okay, there you go. Well, Deb, it was fantastic to have you on. Again, thank you very much for your time. Before we part way, where can our listeners find you on socials?
Yeah, so we're pretty much on all the socials. We're at ISSADA, ISSADA, and at ISSADA Cosmetics, and we're online www.issada.com.
Fantastic. That was a great conversation, Deb. Thank you very much for your time, and then we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.